Okay, hot off the press, this just came in and scribed from Senator Mike Lake. He added his name to this letter this was bipartisan. While we were sleeping, while we weren't sleeping, while we were concentrating on the downturn in the economy and all this crap and stuff they're feeding us, the sky's going to fall, the debt's going to fail, and feeding us all this lies. That was a distraction. Here comes Kerry. He went and signed the Arms Trade Treaty and entered into a treaty. 50 U.S. senators. Now, you're not going to like a couple of these names. 50 senators jumped up and said, hell no. They stopped it cold, dead in its tracks. To President Obama, we write to express our concern and regret to your decision to sign. Oh, Obama signed it. I'm sorry. I thought just Kerry signed it. The United Nations Arms Trade Treaty for the following reasons. We cannot give our advice and consent to this treaty. First, the treaty was adopted by a procedure which violates a red line laid down by your own administration. In October 2009, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton stated that the U.S. supported the negotiation of the treaty only by the rule of consensus decision-making. But in April 23rd, after that treaty failed to achieve consensus, it was adopted by a majority vote in the UN General Assembly. We fear that this reversal has done grave damage to the diplomatic credibility of the United States. Second, the treaty allows amendments by three-quarters majority vote. As the treaty is amended, it will become a source of political and legal pressure on the U.S. to comply in practice with amendments it is willing to accept. This would circumvent the power and duty of the Senate to provide its advice and consent on the treaty commitments before they are assumed by the United States. Okay. He shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. And he shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers, consult judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. The Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the President alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. Now, he needs 2/3 of the senators to tell him it's okay. He doesn't have that. He didn't have that. As a matter of fact, he was told not to do that. On March 23rd at 4:30 in the morning, they had a vote on what they called the Inhofe Agreement, Amendment 139. All right. This is back up. It was agreed to 53 to 46. Okay. Now, the amendment to uphold the Second Amendment rights and prevent the United States from entering into the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty. He was told not to do it. Amendment SA 139 agreed to in the Senate by a yay-nay vote 53 to 46. Okay? Now, I hope I'm going to bring the record up. Okay. You can pause this if I went too fast. All these guys that said yay upheld your constitutional values. All these that said nay went against your Constitution and voted to disarm you during a time of war. When they should have been saying to arms, they were talking about disarming you. Isn't that funny? Every one of them is a Democrat. Oh, wait a minute. You got one independent here. Okay, so all right, so you got one independent in here, and they voted against you. I thought there was two independents. I'm missing one. Oh, you can look at it closer later. Anyway, Sanders from Vermont voted to take so much for your independence. All right, y'all coming down on the Republican Party, Republican Party, Republican Party. Okay. You only had a couple Democrats that stood for your values. Donnelly in Indiana, Begich in Arkansas, Hagan in North Carolina, Henrick in New Mexico, Heitkamp in North Dakota, Manchin in West Virginia, Tester in Montana, Pryor in Arkansas, that's it. Now, back to the letter. Second, the treaty allows for 3/4 majority vote as the treaty is amended. It will become a source of political and legal pressure. Third, the treaty includes only a weak, non-binding reference to the lawful ownership and use of trade in firearms and recognizes none of these activities, much less individual self-defense, as fundamental individual rights. It encourages governments to collect the identities of individuals and users of imported firearms at the national level, which would constitute the core of the National Gun Registry, and it creates a national responsibility to prevent the diversion of firearms which could be used to justify the imposition of controls within the U.S. that would pose a threat to the Second Amendment and infringe on the rights protected therein. Fourth, the State Department has acknowledged that the treaty is ambiguous. By becoming party to the treaty, the U.S. would therefore be accepting commitments that are inherently unclear. The Senate cannot effectively provide advice on an ambiguous treaty, and it should never provide its consent to such a treaty. Fifth, the criteria of the heart of this treaty are vague and easily politicized. They will restrict the ability of the U.S. to conduct their own foreign policy and will steadily subject the U.S. to the influence of international defined norms, a process that would impinge on our national sovereignty. We believe that the treaties which allow foreign sources of authority to impose judgment or control upon the U.S., as this one does, violates the rights of the American people under the Constitution to freely govern themselves. Sixth, the State Department has acknowledged that the specific country concerns, including Taiwan, China, and the Middle East, create challenges for establishing a treaty criteria that can be applied without exception and fit U.S. national security interests. These concerns would make Senate ratification difficult. We are indeed deeply concerned that the treaty criteria as established could hinder the United States in fulfilling its strategic, legal, and moral commitments to provide arms to key allies such as the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the State of Israel. We urge you to notify the treaty depository that the U.S. does not intend to ratify the Arms Trade Treaty and is therefore not bound by its obligations. As members of the Senate, we pledge to oppose the ratification of this treaty, and we give notice that we do not regard the U.S. as bound to uphold its object and purpose. We appreciate your consideration on this issue and look forward to your response. Jerry Moran, Joe Manchin III, James Inhofe, Pat Toomey, Mike Lee, Lamar Alexander, Kelly Aoki, John Barrasso, Mark Bigich, Roy Blunt, John Boozman, Richard Burr, Saxby Chambliss, Daniel Coates, Tom Coburn, Thad Cochran, Susan Collins, John Corin, Mike Crapo, Ted Cruz, Easy Girls, Michael Enzi, Deb Fisher, Jeff Flake, Lindsey Graham. I know you don't like Lindsey Graham. I don't like him too much either. But in the bad hour, he was there. Chuck Grassley, Orrin Hatch, Dean Keller, John Hoven, Johnny Jackson, Mike Jones, Ron Johnson, John McCain. I know. He was there in the hour you needed him, people. Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, Rob Portman, Mark Pryor, James Rich, Pat Roberts, Marco Rubio, and Senator Tim Scott, Jeff Sessions, Richard Shelby, Senator John Thune, David Vitter, Roger Wicker, Kay Hagan, Mary Landry, Mitch McConnell, Jeff Cheesy, Bob Corker. Okay, got 50 senators here, supposedly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 50 senators. Now, people, there's 46 nays on this Amendment 139. They should all be brought up on treason charges, too. Okay? You got Baldwin, Wisconsin. Baucus, Montana. Bennett, Colorado. Blumenthal, Connecticut. Boxer, California. Brown, Ohio. Cantwell, Washington. Cardin, Maryland. Carper, Delaware. Casey, PA. Coons, Delaware. Cohen, Massachusetts. Durbin, Illinois. Feinstein, California. Franken, Minnesota. Gillibrand, New York. Nelson, Florida. Murray, Washington. Murphy, Connecticut. Mikulski, Maryland. Merkley, Oregon. Menendez, New Jersey. McCaskill, Missouri. Levin, Michigan. Leahy, Vermont. Landry, Louisiana. Klobuchar, Minnesota. King, Maine. Kane, Virginia. Johnson, South Dakota. Hirano, Hawaii. Harkin, Iowa. Reed, Rhode Island. Reed, Nevada. Rockefeller, West Virginia. Sanders, Vermont. Schatz, Hawaii. Schumer, New York. Shaheen, New Hampshire. Stabenow, Michigan. Udall, Colorado. Udall, New Mexico. Warner, Virginia. Warren, Massachusetts. Whitehouse, Rhode Island. Wyden, Oregon.